get a good feeling, yeah. I get a feeling that I never had before. No, no, I get a good feeling, yeah. Oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah.
So as you can see, I'm out in Lanzarote still, preparing or going through the final stages of preparation for the Ironman, which is in 16 days time now. It's going to be my first full distance race for 3 years. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm really pleased to be able to be on the start line, because for the last 3 months, as some of you will know, I've been struggling a bit with a calf injury. I say struggling, maybe struggling is the wrong word, managing is probably a better word. It's been a minor tear of my tibialis posterior. We diagnosed it as, in the end, the physio, Lindsay at Peak Health Clinic diagnosed it as. Eventually, I thought it might be a Soleus tear, but it probably isn't, based on all of the symptoms. And I've been working really closely with Lindsay since I last returned from Lanzarote, which was the end of March, to help me recover, rehabilitate it, and try and be ready to race the Ironman. And it was really ambitious to be expecting or trying to build towards the Ironman, because I had a period between the 10th of Feb and 19th of March, something like that. So I had a period of time between a race in the middle of Feb and then the middle of March, where I wasn't able to run because I picked up the injury in the race in Feb. I still did the race in March, but it was pretty painful and pretty uncomfortable. Lots of debate about whether I should or shouldn't have done it, and I've written about why I did, so if you want to know about that, there's a blog available for you to read a little bit about that. But it turns out that since I got home to the UK, over about a 4-week period, with Lindsay's help, I was able to go through a process that allowed me to return to running. So what have I been doing to get myself in a place where I'm possibly going to be able to finish an Ironman in 16 days time, having had such a long period of injury? So first and foremost, I suppose, is that up until I got the injury, one of the things I pride myself on is my consistent mediocrity. I'm not a particularly high quality trainer. When I say not high quality, I don't train with fantastic outputs. So I don't run very fast, I don't bike with very good output numbers, and I don't swim particularly quickly. And in fact, in training, I don't often deliver numbers that anyone would see as any indication of the way that I perform in races. So I'm a big advocate and very proud of my consistency, but the fact that I'm happy with being consistently mediocre. And what it means is that I've been able to train consistently for the best part of 5 years, injury-free, and with my only breaks from training being deliberate breaks, choices for recovery and rest periods. So the last time I was injured was way back in 2017. So the first really key part to my rehab and recovery has been that I was so consistent before. And I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and some people don't actually prioritise enough. And for me, I think it's a key part of why I've been able to return so quickly, because of the base that I had under my belt, despite the fact I'm relatively new to this sport for most people, compared to most people, having only taken up the sport when I was 36. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that when I returned, I'm normally pretty good at understanding my body, but I was really unsure about this injury. So when I returned from Lanzarote the last time at the end of March, I went straight to the physio. So I got in touch with the physio, booked an appointment immediately, like within the first day or two, didn't procrastinate or dither about that. Went to her and got her to have a look at what was going on, to understand more about the reality of the injury that I was, so rather than guessing what it was, actually understand what was going on. Now, I also was prepared to accept that physiotherapy isn't an exact science. A lot of athletes and a lot of physios concern me, because they almost want to find these finite and definite answers all the time. I know physios that just feel like they've got to be these magicians, that if you go and see them, they're going to tell you definitely what the injury is, exactly what it is you've got to do to rehab it. Athletes that have that expectation from physiotherapists, and I'm under no illusions that's not the case. So the next thing was about managing my expectations of Lindsay, knowing that she wouldn't be able to definitely tell me what was wrong with me, but she could do her best to assess it within the limitations that she had. She decided, or we decided together, that a scan wasn't that important, and so we chose not to have a scan, certainly for the first 2 or 3 weeks. So far it's turned out to be the right decision. I asked Lindsay to help me make decisions about what I should and shouldn't do in terms of training, volume, intensity and type. I didn't run for about well, about 4 weeks after I returned from Lanzarote, and that would be about 5 weeks between the race, the second race I did, but fundamentally it ended up being about 2.5 months without running. I also asked Lindsay to make sure that she was really explicit about what her recommendation was at physio. She knew I was aiming to try and be ready for Ironman Lanzarote, but what I didn't want her to do was worry about any responsibility she felt she might have as an athlete or like a coach. I wanted to make sure she knew I was prepared to take responsibility for that. So if that meant her saying to me, you can't run and you're not going to be ready to do the Ironman, that was my problem to deal with, not hers. She didn't need to try and get me ready for the Ironman. She needed to rehab me appropriately and forget about my race goal. You know, not that we didn't talk about it, but I didn't want that to cloud her judgment when she was guiding me. So that was what we did. I also made sure that she didn't feel like she was putting me under pressure to book me back in for more appointments, because of course for any specialist like a physiotherapist, any kind of therapist, sometimes we worry that, you know, we don't want to encourage people to perhaps pay more money or spend more time on things that they might not need to. But my sort of position was, look, if it's going to be of benefit to me, I'm happy to do it. I spend so much time and money anyway prepping. I'd rather have a couple more appointments and treatments to reduce the risk of a relapse. So I made sure that Lindsay was comfortable with that as well, so that she could do her job properly, and therefore I would be able to then take responsibility for the rest. So I think that's a really important learning point for lots of people, is that it's not the physio's job necessarily to get you ready for the race unless they're working for you as an athlete as part of that process, or they're working for your coach. That's your coach's job, or your job if you're self-coached, as I am in my case, to make sure that you consider those variables, and that the physio's job is to do what they're qualified and their specialist area is. I did use some of the other people around me to help me make decisions. So I used my wife Lauren a lot to help me make decisions around certain things. I also made sure that I controlled all of the controllables that I could. So what are the sort of things on top of the treatment I had with Lindsay that I controlled? Lindsay recommended some supplements in my diet, which I made sure that I had available to me and I took. I also started using some collagen supplements from Uperform, which Lauren sourced for me, under recommendation from a friend of mine, Caroline Livesey. She recommended that to me. Obviously stuff like that's hard to know if it makes a difference, but if you can do it, why not, if it might. So I started using some collagen supplements and some other vitamin and mineral supplements that were recommended to help aid recovery. I made sure that my sleep was on point, and if I needed to skip early morning sessions to allow myself to get sufficient sleep, I did. I changed my footwear, not just my, mostly I changed my casual footwear, if that makes sense. So what I did was I made sure I wore footwear that was very supportive and made sure that my body wasn't under too much unnecessary duress when I was just out walking the dog or whatever. I changed the footwear that I generally wore to running, so I normally mix my footwear up, but I stuck with, in this particular case, a Hoka Carbon X2, which I find a very supportive shoe for me. I even made sure that I chose the right socks that were the most comfortable and fitted my feet the best. I only ran on the treadmill for the first 2 weeks, so once I did return to running, I only ran on the treadmill, and I had a very carefully progressive process, and I've only run at or below my Ironman race pace. I haven't run any faster than that now since I returned to running. So I was very careful about that. Since I've come to Lanzarote, I have run on the road, because at some point I needed to do that, and that was also recommended to me by the physio. But what I did when I returned to running on the road, some of you that may follow me on Instagram will know that I chose a route that was very controllable and allowed me to be very close to home. So what I actually did was I had a loop here in Puerto Calero where we're staying, which is 1.25 or 1.28 Ks, and I did 24 laps of 1.28K, which a lot of people thought was crazy, but for me it took away a lot of stress, took away a lot of worry, and allowed me to concentrate really hard on what I needed to do, which was maintain good form, tune into my body, not worry about a niggle stopping me 10 kilometers from where I needed to be, and it worked. I was able to get a good long run in on the road really successfully. What else have I done? I also put on some weight. So I made a deliberate choice to put on about a kilo, 1 to 2 kilos. This is maybe a bit contentious, but it shouldn't be. I actually weigh myself normally 1 or 2 times a day, not because I'm obsessive about my weight. I have a rough idea of what I probably should be at in races. But the reason I do that is because if I don't weigh myself, I don't know what I should weigh. So I have no way of understanding what my weight should or shouldn't be at any given time during the year. And because I have a really good handle on what my body composition is like all the way through the year, I was able to make a really clear decision to gain some weight to help me with the recovery from this injury, and I was able to track that really easily without farting about with too many things. I could just weigh myself and track that progressive increase in weight. So what I did was increase my calorie intake, made sure my carbohydrate intake was a bit higher than normal, protein intake was sufficient, and tried to function a slight calorie surplus and gain a little bit of weight, so that that would help me to recover from my injury. Because of course, recovering from injury, if you're in a calorie surplus or even calorie balance, that's going to be, the chance of you being able to do that is going to be diminished and reduced. I also changed my bike training. So what I did was I reduced the number of high intensity sessions I was doing, or higher intensity sessions. I don't do that many anyway, and being a bit of an older athlete, that's high risk for me. So what I did is I brought the intensity of my bike sessions down. So most of my bike sessions were done in a zone 1 or zone 2 intensity, to make sure that my overall fatigue and sort of cell inflammation, muscle tissue inflammation was reduced, so that whilst I was trying to get back into running, my body wasn't having to cope with that too. And again, the long-term consistency prior to that helped with me being able to be comfortable taking that intensity down and not panicking about losing fitness. Even the swim intensity I took down, so I even took the swim intensity down a little bit, and I took 1 swim a week out of my program. So those are some of the things that I've done. I think that's probably everything that I can think of. But as you can see, I've been really, really careful about that, about the choices that I've made. I've tried to do everything I possibly could. I've been open-minded about the reality and whether or not racing Ironman Lanzarote was going to be possible. I still am. I'm 16 days out, and I'm under no illusions that something could still go wrong. But that's what I've done to return from this injury, and hopefully I'm going to be fit enough to start the run in 16 days and finish it. It's probably not going to be as fast as I would have hoped to have under normal circumstances, which is fine by me, and it may hurt a little bit more than I would have liked in the last 10k, but then Ironman always hurts in the last 10k, and it might not. So I just feel really relieved to be here and actually be able to be thinking about starting the race, because 3 months ago that wasn't something that was going to be a possibility. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight. I'm sure Lauren will have edited parts of this out to make it a bit more concise. And if there's anything forgotten, I might add a few extras in later. But if you've got any questions, stick them in the comments below, or message me directly, and don't forget to like and subscribe Lauren's Passion Fit YouTube channel. Cheers guys.